John had always believed in the sanctity of marriage. He and Jessica had been together since college, married young, and built a life around their love and two beautiful children, Lily and Max. John worked as an accountant, providing stability while Jessica stayed at home to take care of the kids and manage the household. They seemed like the perfect family, but perfection is often an illusion. Jessica had always been a bit high-strung, prone to outbursts and quick to anger. Yet, she could also be charming and persuasive, capable of talking her way out of almost any situation. This was one of the qualities that had drawn John to her initially. However, over time, it became clear that Jessica's charm often masked a darker side. Her tendency to lie and manipulate. It all started innocently enough, or so John thought. Jessica frequently used Uber to run errands or pick up the kids from school. She would come home, sometimes late, with stories about how great her driver was. "Tom is such a nice guy," she'd say. "Always on time, knows all the best shortcuts." At first, John didn't think much of it. After all, what harm could there be in a friendly chat with an Uber driver? But soon, the rides became more frequent. Jessica was spending more and more time away from home, and whenever John asked where she was going, she always had some excuse ready. Work meeting, picking up groceries, running errands. John never questioned her because, well, why would he? She was his wife, and he trusted her. One evening, after another long day, Jessica came home later than usual. She had taken the kids to soccer practice and needed to run a few errands afterward. When she finally walked through the door, she looked flustered. Her hair was a mess, and her face was flushed. John asked if everything was okay, but she brushed him off like she always did. "Traffic," she said, tossing her keys onto the counter. "You know how it is." John believed her. Of course, he did. They had been married for nearly a decade, and he trusted her. Or at least, he thought he did. Little did he know, those innocent rides were slowly turning into something far more sinister. And it wasn't until much later that John realized just how deep the deception ran. He couldn't have imagined that these seemingly harmless conversations with Tom would lead to a betrayal so profound that it would tear their lives apart. The seeds of suspicion began to sprout in John's mind. He started noticing small details that he had previously overlooked. Jessica's phone was always close by, and she would quickly lock it whenever John approached. She spent hours scrolling through her device, often with a secretive smile on her face. It was subtle, but John's instincts told him something was amiss. He tried to push the thoughts aside, telling himself that he was being paranoid. Maybe Jessica was just stressed with managing the household and taking care of the kids. After all, they had both been under a lot of pressure lately. But the doubts lingered, gnawing at him every time Jessica mentioned Tom or her frequent trips. As weeks passed, John found himself increasingly preoccupied with Jessica's behavior. He noticed that she was dressing differently, putting more effort into her appearance. She would spend hours in front of the mirror, applying makeup and styling her hair. At first, John assumed she was trying to boost her confidence, but now he wondered if there was another reason behind it. The tension between them grew palpable. Conversations became strained, filled with unspoken accusations and simmering resentment. John felt like he was walking on eggshells, afraid that any wrong word might trigger an explosive argument. Jessica, sensing his growing suspicion, became more defensive and irritable, lashing out at the slightest provocation. Despite his concerns, John still clung to the hope that things could improve. He wanted to believe that Jessica was simply going through a rough patch and that they could work through their issues together. He suggested couples counseling, hoping that professional guidance might help them reconnect and rebuild their trust. But Jessica dismissed the idea, claiming that they didn't need outside help and insisting that everything was fine. Deep down, John knew that something was fundamentally wrong. The foundation of their marriage was crumbling, and no amount of denial or avoidance could change that fact. But he wasn't ready to give up yet. He loved Jessica, and he was willing to fight for their relationship, even if it meant confronting uncomfortable truths and facing painful realities. As the weeks went by, John started noticing subtle changes in Jessica's behavior. She was spending more and more time away from home, and whenever he asked where she was going, she always had some excuse ready. Work meeting, picking up groceries, running errands. John never questioned her because, well, why would he? She was his wife, and he trusted her. But then, the excuses started to pile up. One evening, she told him she was going to meet a friend for dinner. Hours passed, and John got worried when she didn't return. Finally, she showed up, looking disheveled and agitated. "Where have you been?" John asked, genuinely concerned. "Oh, sorry, honey," she said, rolling her eyes. "Traffic was terrible, and we ended up talking for hours. You know how it is." John let it slide. He meant, what else could he do? But deep down, something gnawed at him. Why was she always late? Why did she look so frazzled every time she came home? Then came the night that really set off alarm bells. John was working late at the office, and Jessica had taken the kids to a birthday party. When he got home, he found her sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone. She jumped when she saw him. "Hey, honey," she said, too brightly. "How was work?" "Fine," John replied, eyeing her suspiciously. "You okay?" "Yeah, why wouldn't I be?" she snapped, her tone shifting abruptly. John shrugged it off and went to check on the kids. Later that night, while Jessica was in the shower, he picked up her phone. He knew it was a violation of privacy, but something inside him couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. There, in her messages, he found the evidence he had feared. Dozens of texts exchanged with someone named Tom. They were flirtatious, intimate, and unmistakably romantic. John felt sick as he read through their conversations. They had been planning meetings outside of her Uber rides. They had been seeing each other in secret. John confronted her the next morning. She denied everything at first, of course. She screamed, cried, and accused him of snooping. But when he showed her the messages, her face crumpled. For a moment, John thought she might break down and admit everything. But instead, she turned vicious. "You're overreacting," she spat. "We're just friends. You're blowing this out of proportion." John knew then that there was no point in trying to reason with her. She was going to dig her heels in and fight tooth and nail to keep her lies intact. Over the following days, Jessica's lies only grew more elaborate. She fabricated stories about where she had been, who she had met, and what she had done. John tried to stay calm, but the constant barrage of falsehoods wore him down. He began to feel like he was living in a house of mirrors, where nothing was real and everything was distorted by Jessica's manipulations. The tension between them escalated rapidly. Arguments became commonplace, and the once peaceful atmosphere of their home turned toxic. John found himself constantly questioning everything Jessica said, unable to trust even the simplest of statements. It was exhausting, both mentally and emotionally. Despite his suspicions, John still clung to a shred of hope that things could be salvaged. He wanted to believe that Jessica could change, that she could see the error of her ways and make amends. But deep down, he knew that the damage had already been done. The foundation of their marriage had crumbled, and there was no easy way to rebuild it. John's attempts to communicate with Jessica only led to more conflict. Every conversation devolved into shouting matches, with Jessica hurling insults and accusations at him. She claimed that he was controlling, paranoid, and jealous, painting herself as the victim in their deteriorating relationship. John tried to explain his concerns, but she refused to listen, dismissing his worries as baseless and irrational. As the days turned into weeks, John's frustration reached a boiling point. He couldn't bear the constant lying and manipulation any longer. He decided to confront Jessica once again, determined to get to the bottom of the situation. "Jessica, we need to talk," John said sternly, his voice firm but controlled. "I can't keep living like this. The lies have to stop." Jessica glared at him, her eyes flashing with defiance. What lies are you talking about? I haven't done anything wrong. Don't play games with me, John replied, his patience wearing thin. I've seen the texts, Jessica. I know about your affair with Tom. How could you do this to us? Jessica's face twisted in anger. You don't understand anything. Tom means nothing to me. He's just a friend. A friend who you've been having sex with? John shot back, his voice rising. Don't insult my intelligence, Jessica. I know what's going on. Jessica's composure crumbled, and she erupted into a fit of rage. You're ruining everything. You're making me out to be some kind of monster. I hate you. The words stung, cutting deep into John's heart. He had hoped that Jessica would finally acknowledge the truth and take responsibility for her actions, but instead, she doubled down on her lies and accusations. It was clear that she had no intention of changing her ways. As the argument raged on, John realized that there was no point in continuing the conversation. Jessica was beyond reasoning with, consumed by her own delusions and insecurities. He knew that the only way to protect himself and his children was to distance himself from her toxic influence. With a heavy heart, John made the difficult decision to file for divorce. It was a painful and heartbreaking choice, but he knew it was the right one. He couldn't continue living in a marriage built on lies and deceit, and he refused to subject his children to the same toxic environment. The process of filing for divorce was grueling and emotionally draining. John hired a lawyer and began the arduous task of separating their assets and determining custody arrangements. Jessica fought him every step of the way, using every legal tactic at her disposal to delay the proceedings and complicate the situation. She threatened to take full custody of the children, claiming that John was unfit to be a father, but John stood his ground, determined to protect his family. He gathered evidence of Jessica's infidelity and presented it to the court, demonstrating that she was not fit to raise the children in her current state. The judge reviewed the case carefully, taking into account the best interests of Lily and Max, and ultimately granted John primary custody. The victory was bittersweet. John knew that he had won the battle, but the war was far from over. Jessica's vindictive nature ensured that she would continue to cause trouble and create chaos wherever she went. But John was prepared for whatever challenges lay ahead, knowing that he had the strength and determination to overcome them. After confronting Jessica about her affair with Tom, the tension in their house became unbearable. She continued to deny everything, insisting that they were just friends. Meanwhile, John was consumed by suspicion and anger. Every time she left the house, he wondered where she was really going. Every time she came home, he scrutinized her every move, searching for signs of betrayal, but nothing could have prepared him for what happened next. One evening, John decided to surprise Jessica by coming home early from work. He had planned to take her out for dinner, hoping to salvage whatever was left of their relationship. As he pulled into the driveway, he noticed her car parked in its usual spot. That was odd. She usually took Uber when she went out. Curious, he quietly entered the house. The kids were upstairs playing, oblivious to the storm brewing downstairs. John called out for Jessica, but there was no answer. Confused, he headed towards the garage, figuring she might have gone out for a quick errand. That's when he heard it, the unmistakable sound of voices coming from the garage. Not just any voices, but Jessica's voice, followed by a man's. John's heart raced as he crept closer, peering through the slightly open garage door. There, in the dim light, he saw them. Jessica and Tom, tangled together in the back seat of his taxi. They were kissing passionately, their hands roaming each other's bodies. John's blood boiled as he watched them, unable to tear his eyes away. Suddenly, Jessica pushed Tom away, glancing nervously towards the door. She must have seen John standing there because her face turned pale. Tom, oblivious to John's presence, leaned in for another kiss. That was the final straw. John stormed into the garage, his fists clenched in rage. "What the hell is going on here?" he roared. Jessica leapt out of the car, her face twisted in a mixture of fear and defiance. "It's not what it looks like. Not what it looks like. John repeated, his voice shaking with fury. You're having sex with your Uber driver in our garage, Jessica. How can you possibly explain that away? Tom scrambled out of the car, his face flushed with embarrassment. Look, man, I didn't mean, shut up. John barked, turning his glare on him. This has nothing to do with you. Jessica, ever the manipulator, tried to turn the tables on John. You're making a big deal out of nothing. We weren't doing anything wrong. Nothing wrong? John laughed bitterly. You've been lying to me for months, cheating on me with this stranger. And now you're telling me it's nothing? She lunged at him, her nails digging into his arms. You don't understand. He means nothing to me. It was just a mistake. A mistake? John shoved her away, his patience completely gone. You've destroyed our marriage, Jessica. Our family. And you call it a mistake? With that, John stormed out of the garage, leaving her screaming behind him. He knew then that there was no going back. Their marriage was over, and he was going to make sure she paid for what she had done. The scene replayed in John's mind endlessly over the next few days. He couldn't escape the image of Jessica and Tom together, their betrayal searing itself into his memory. The shock and pain of the discovery left him reeling, struggling to process the depth of her deceit. He felt betrayed, humiliated, and utterly defeated. As the reality of the situation sank in, John began to plan his next steps. He knew that divorce was inevitable, but he also understood that the battle ahead would be fierce. Jessica was not going to give up easily, and he braced himself for the legal and emotional turmoil that lay ahead. The aftermath of the discovery was a whirlwind of emotions. John oscillated between anger, grief, and disbelief, unable to fully grasp the magnitude of Jessica's betrayal. He felt like he had been living in a dream world, blind to the reality of their crumbling marriage. Now, the harsh truth had shattered his illusions, leaving him to pick up the pieces of his broken life. In the days that followed, John struggled to maintain his composure in front of the children. He didn't want them to see the pain and turmoil he was experiencing, so he put on a brave face and tried to act normal. But the weight of the situation pressed heavily on his shoulders, threatening to crush him under its immense burden. John's colleagues at work noticed his distress and offered their support, but he found it difficult to confide in anyone. The shame and humiliation of being cheated on by his wife made him feel isolated and alone. He withdrew into himself, focusing on his work as a distraction from the chaos at home. Meanwhile, Jessica's behavior became increasingly erratic. She lashed out at John, accusing him of spying on her and invading her privacy. She claimed that he was trying to sabotage their relationship and ruin her life. Her volatile mood swings and hysterical outbursts made it impossible to have any meaningful conversation with her. Despite the mounting tension, John remained resolute in his decision to end the marriage. He consulted with his lawyer, gathering evidence and preparing for the upcoming divorce proceedings. The process was complicated and emotionally draining, but John was determined to see it through to the end. As the divorce proceedings progressed, John faced numerous challenges and obstacles. Jessica fought him tooth and nail, using every legal maneuver at her disposal to delay the process and complicate the situation. She contested every aspect of the settlement, from asset division to child custody, making it clear that she had no intention of cooperating, but John refused to back down. He presented the evidence of Jessica's infidelity to the court, demonstrating that she was unfit to raise the children in her current state. The judge reviewed the case carefully, taking into account the best interests of Lily and Max, and ultimately granted John primary custody. The victory was bittersweet. John knew that he had won the battle, but the war was far from over. Jessica's vindictive nature ensured that she would continue to cause trouble and create chaos wherever she went. But John was prepared for whatever challenges lay ahead, knowing that he had the strength and determination to overcome them. The air was thick with tension as John drove home from the lawyer's office. Jessica's hollow apology echoed in his mind, but it did nothing to quell the anger and betrayal he felt. She had tried to manipulate him once again, even in her moment of defeat. But this time, John wasn't falling for it. He had seen through her lies too many times. As he pulled into the driveway of their new house, a cozy, modest home nestled in a quiet neighborhood, he took a deep breath. The kids were waiting inside, and they deserved all the love and attention he could give them. They were the only thing that mattered now. Lily, his 7-year-old daughter, rushed to the door when she heard John's car pull up. Her face lit up with excitement as she ran towards him, arms outstretched. Max, his 5-year-old son, followed more slowly, dragging his favorite stuffed bear behind him. "Daddy!" Lily cried, wrapping her small arms around his legs. "Did you get us ice cream like you promised?" John chuckled, scooping her up into his arms. "Of course I did, sweetheart. And guess what? We're going to have a movie night tonight." Max's eyes widened. "Can we watch Toy Story?" "Anything you want, buddy," John said, ruffling his son's hair. For a brief moment, everything felt normal. The weight of the divorce and the pain of Jessica's betrayal seemed to lift, if only for a little while, but as the evening wore on, John couldn't help but feel a gnawing sense of unease. He knew that Jessica wasn't going to let things go so easily. She had always been stubborn, and her need for control wouldn't just disappear overnight. Even though the judge had granted John primary custody, Jessica still had visitation rights, and John dreaded the thought of her showing up unannounced, disrupting the peace he was trying so hard to maintain. True to his fears, a few days later, John received a text from Jessica. "I miss the kids. Can I come over tomorrow?" John stared at the message, his fingers hovering over the keyboard. He didn't want her anywhere near his children, especially after what he had witnessed in the garage. But legally, he couldn't deny her visitation without a valid reason. He sighed, typing out a reply. "Fine. Tomorrow afternoon. Be on your best behavior." The next day, John braced himself as he waited for Jessica to arrive. He had warned the kids ahead of time, telling them that Mommy would be coming over but reminding them that they were staying with Daddy. Lily and Max both seemed excited to see their mother, but John noticed a hint of uncertainty in their eyes. They had picked up on the tension between their parents, even if they didn't fully understand it. Jessica arrived promptly at 3 o'clock, looking disheveled and tired. She had clearly not taken care of herself since the divorce proceedings began. Her usually well-kept hair was frizzy, and dark circles underlined her eyes. But despite her appearance, there was still a spark of defiance in her gaze, a refusal to admit defeat. "Hey, guys," she said, forcing a smile as she hugged Lily and Max. "How are my babies?" "We're fine, Mommy," Lily replied, her voice tinged with confusion. "We've been having fun with Daddy." Jessica's smile faltered for a moment, but she quickly recovered. "That's great. I'm glad you're happy." John watched from a distance, his arms crossed over his chest. He didn't trust Jessica, and he made sure she knew it. After about an hour of strained conversation and awkward silences, Jessica finally stood up. "I should go," she said, avoiding John's eyes. "It's getting late." "Good," John muttered under his breath, but loud enough for her to hear. As Jessica gathered her things and prepared to leave, she turned to John one last time. "You know, John, I really am sorry. I don't want to lose my kids." John's jaw tightened. "Then maybe you shouldn't have cheated on me with a stranger." Her face flushed with anger, but she bit her tongue. Without another word, she left the house, slamming the door behind her. The sound reverberated through the walls, leaving an unsettling silence in its wake. In the days that followed, John found himself grappling with conflicting emotions. Part of him wanted to forgive Jessica, to give her another chance to redeem herself. But the rational part of him knew that she had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. Her betrayal had shattered the trust that was the cornerstone of their marriage, and there was no going back. As John focused on rebuilding his life and caring for his children, he couldn't shake the feeling that Jessica was plotting her next move. She was unpredictable, volatile, and desperate, and John knew that she would stop at nothing to regain control over their lives. The fallout from the divorce was devastating. John found himself navigating a complex web of legal battles, financial struggles, and emotional turmoil. The separation of assets was contentious, with Jessica fighting tooth and nail to secure as much as possible. She claimed that John had hidden money in assets, accusing him of trying to cheat her out of her rightful share. Despite the challenges, John remained steadfast in his commitment to his children. He prioritized their well-being above all else, ensuring that they had a stable and loving environment to grow up in. He enrolled them in extracurricular activities, spent quality time with them, and made sure they felt loved and supported. But Jessica's interference continued to cast a shadow over their lives. She would show up unannounced, causing scenes and creating drama. She would badmouth John to the kids, trying to turn them against him and undermine his authority. Her manipulative tactics were relentless, and John found himself constantly on guard, protecting his children from her toxic influence. The emotional toll of the situation weighed heavily on John. He struggled to balance his responsibilities as a father with the overwhelming burden of dealing with Jessica's downward spiral. It was a constant battle to shield his children from the worst of it while trying to maintain his own sanity. In the weeks that followed, Jessica's behavior grew increasingly erratic. She started calling John at all hours of the night, begging to see the kids or accusing him of turning them against her. Each call was more desperate than the last, filled with hysterical sobs and angry outbursts. One particularly grueling night, John's phone rang at 2 in the morning. He groggily answered, knowing exactly who it would be. "John, please. You have to let me see them." Jessica's voice was slurred, and John could hear the unmistakable sound of alcohol in the background. "Not now, Jessica. It's 2 in the morning. The kids are sleeping. I don't care. I need to see them. You can't keep me away from my own children." John pinched the bridge of his nose, trying to remain calm. "You know the terms of the custody agreement. You have visitation rights, but you can't show up whenever you want, especially when you're drunk." There was a pause on the other end of the line, followed by a sob. "You're ruining my life, John. You're taking everything from me." "You're doing that to yourself," John said firmly. "Now go to bed and sober up. We'll talk in the morning." He hung up the phone, feeling a mix of pity and frustration. Jessica was unraveling before his eyes, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. He had tried to protect her, to give her a chance to redeem herself, but she refused to take responsibility for her actions. As the days passed, Jessica's mental state continued to deteriorate. She stopped showing up for her scheduled visits, claiming various excuses: illness, work emergencies, car troubles. But John knew the truth. She was spiraling into a deep depression, unable to cope with the reality of her situation. Meanwhile, John focused on creating a stable and loving environment for his children. He enrolled them in extracurricular activities, spent quality time with them, and made sure they felt loved and supported. Despite the chaos surrounding their family, John wanted them to grow up feeling secure and happy, but Jessica wasn't done yet. One afternoon, John received a shocking phone call from the school principal. "Mr. Thompson, we've had some concerns about Lily's behavior lately. She seems withdrawn and anxious, and she mentioned something about her mother being gone." John's heart sank. He had tried to shield the kids from the worst of the drama, but it was clear that they were picking up on the tension between their parents. He thanked the principal and promised to address the issue. That evening, John sat down with Lily and Max, gently asking them how they were feeling. Lily hesitated at first, but eventually opened up. "I miss Mommy," she whispered, her lower lip trembling. "Why doesn't she come to see us anymore?" John's heart broke. He wanted to tell her the truth, that her mother had made bad choices and was struggling to get better, but he knew that wouldn't help. Instead, he chose his words carefully. "Mommy loves you very much, sweetie. But sometimes grown-ups have problems they need to work through. She's trying to get better, but it's taking some time. Lily nodded, but John could see the sadness in her eyes. He hugged her tightly, promising to do everything he could to make things better. The emotional toll of the situation weighed heavily on John. He struggled to balance his responsibilities as a father with the overwhelming burden of dealing with Jessica's downward spiral. It was a constant battle to shield his children from the worst of it while trying to maintain his own sanity. John sought therapy for himself and the kids, hoping that professional guidance might help them navigate the emotional fallout of the divorce. The therapist provided valuable insights and coping strategies, helping John develop a framework for addressing the children's concerns and fostering a supportive environment. Despite his efforts, Jessica's behavior continued to worsen. She became increasingly unstable, exhibiting signs of severe depression and anxiety. She would lash out at John during their supervised visits, making wild accusations and threatening to take legal action against him. Her desperation and instability were palpable, and John knew that she was teetering on the edge of a complete breakdown. As the months dragged on, John found himself caught in a cycle of endless legal battles and emotional turmoil. Jessica's vindictiveness knew no bounds, and she employed every tactic at her disposal to undermine John's parental rights. She filed multiple appeals, attempting to overturn the custody agreement and gain full custody of the children. Her relentless pursuit of revenge left John exhausted and demoralized. Amidst the chaos, John remained committed to providing a stable and loving environment for his children. He focused on building a strong bond with Lily and Max, ensuring that they felt safe and supported. He encouraged open communication, allowing them to express their feelings and concerns without judgment. Through patience, understanding, and unwavering love, John helped his children navigate the complexities of their fractured family dynamic. Despite the hardships, John found solace in the resilience of his children. Lily and Max demonstrated remarkable strength and adaptability, gradually adjusting to their new reality. They thrived under John's care, flourishing in school and developing healthy relationships with their peers. Witnessing their growth and happiness brought John a sense of fulfillment and purpose, reinforcing his resolve to protect them from further harm. As Jessica's downward spiral continued, John remained vigilant, monitoring her actions and safeguarding his children's well-being. He worked closely with his lawyer to ensure that Jessica adhered to the terms of the custody agreement, minimizing her disruptive influence on their lives. Though the road ahead was fraught with challenges, John drew strength from his unwavering commitment to his family, determined to build a brighter future for himself and his children. Months went by, and Jessica's downward spiral showed no signs of stopping. She had lost her job, her friends, and any semblance of stability in her life. John had reluctantly allowed her to visit the kids a few more times, but each encounter ended in tears and accusations. It was clear that Jessica was incapable of handling the responsibilities of parenthood in her current state. One evening, as John was tucking the kids into bed, his phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Jessica. "I need to see the kids now. I'm outside your house." John's blood ran cold. He glanced out the window and saw Jessica's car parked across the street, headlights still on. He quickly ushered the kids into their rooms and grabbed his phone. "What are you doing here, Jessica?" he typed angrily. "It's late, and the kids are asleep." "I don't care," she replied. "Let me in, or I'll call the cops and say you're keeping them from me." John's hands trembled with rage. This was the final straw. He dialed the police immediately, explaining the situation and requesting assistance. Within minutes, 2 officers arrived at his house. Jessica was pacing back and forth in front of her car, shouting obscenities when the police approached her. She tried to argue, insisting that she had every right to see her children, but the officers were unmoved. They recognized the signs of distress and intoxication, and they placed her under arrest for public intoxication and disturbing the peace. As Jessica was led away in handcuffs, she screamed at John, her voice filled with venom. "This isn't over, John. You'll pay for this. I'll never forgive you." John stood in the doorway, watching as the police car drove away with Jessica inside. For the first time in months, he felt a sense of relief. Jessica was finally out of their lives, at least for now. He knew that the road ahead would be difficult, but he was determined to protect his children and ensure they had a happy, stable future. The incident marked a turning point in John's life. With Jessica removed from the equation, he could focus entirely on rebuilding his family. He sought therapy for himself and the kids, helping them navigate the emotional fallout of the divorce. Slowly but surely, they began to heal, finding strength in each other and forging a new path forward. John's newfound freedom allowed him to rediscover his passion for life. He pursued hobbies and interests that he had neglected during the tumultuous years of his marriage, finding joy in activities that brought him fulfillment and satisfaction. He reconnected with old friends, rebuilding social connections and expanding his support network. The legal battles with Jessica continued, but John remained steadfast in his commitment to protecting his children. He worked closely with his lawyer to finalize the divorce proceedings, ensuring that Jessica's influence was minimized in their lives. Though the process was arduous and emotionally taxing, John persevered, driven by his unwavering dedication to his family. As time passed, John and the kids settled into a new routine, embracing the opportunities and challenges that came their way. They established new traditions, creating memories and experiences that strengthened their bond. John's love and devotion provided a solid foundation for their growth and development, fostering an environment of love, security, and happiness. Despite the scars of the past, John found peace in the knowledge that he had done everything he could to protect his family. Lily and Max grew up strong and resilient, aware of their mother's mistakes but grateful for the stability their father provided. They thrived under John's care, developing into confident, compassionate individuals with bright futures ahead. As John looked back on those tumultuous years, he realized that sometimes, the hardest battles are the ones worth fighting. He had faced betrayal, deception, and heartbreak, but in the end, he had emerged victorious. His family was safe, and that was all that mattered, and so, John moved forward, ready to embrace whatever challenges lay ahead, knowing that he had the strength and resilience to overcome anything life threw his way. He had learned that true love and commitment required sacrifice, honesty, and unwavering dedication. And with that understanding, he vowed to build a brighter future for himself and his children, free from the shadows of the past.